Call to order the meeting of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Board of Managers, May 25th, 2023. This meeting is being conducted as a hybrid meeting. Manager Hejmati is attending from a publicly accessible site that is listed in our agenda. Because it's a hybrid meeting, all roll call and votes will be taken, all votes and attendance will be taken by roll call. Manager Miller.
Here.
Manager Olson.
Here.
Manager Loftus.
Here.
Manager Maxwell.
Here.
Manager Miller. I'm sorry, Manager Hejmati.
Here.
Thank you. Manager White is here. We have full attendance.
Here. That's,
I knew I was skipping somebody. Thank you, Steve.
oh, that's fine.
Manager Sando?
Yes, here. All here.
My apologies. My apologies. I see no members of the public to address us, so let's move to item 3, which is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Manager Miller moves. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll take a second from Manager Maxwell. And then again by roll call. Manager Olson?
Here.
Manager Loftus?
Aye.
Manager Maxwell?
Aye.
Manager Miller?
Aye.
Manager Hejmati?
Aye.
Manager Sando?
Aye.
And Manager White says aye. The agenda is approved. We have on the consent agenda approval of the May 11th board meeting, the minutes, and the 3 check registers for general checking account, surety checking account, and wire transfers. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move approval.
I'll take a motion for Manager Olson, a second for Manager Miller. Voting on the consent agenda, Manager Olson?
Aye.
Manager Loftus?
Aye.
Manager Maxwell?
Aye.
Manager Miller?
Aye.
Manager Hejmati?
Aye.
Manager Sando?
Aye.
And Manager White votes aye as well. Consent agenda is approved. My president's report. I had one meeting. I went to the Hopkins Council meeting last week where Mr. Heyman was presenting on the maintenance cooperation agreement that we'd approved the week before. They approved it. So there was an update from Aladdis following that action that was taken. And Manager Maxwell got a round of applause from the council.
Yeah, I'm sure they did.
They did. No, they did. I saw it. And then one other item, and that is, we had a previous discussion about the annual meeting of the Minnesota Watersheds conflicting with the date we'd set for our meeting on November 30th. And there are a number of ways we could handle it. We could meet on Monday of that week, which is after Thanksgiving. We could meet before Thanksgiving. We could bump it out to December 7 and change both December meetings. I guess I would be in favor of meeting on the 27th of November, which is Monday of that week after Thanksgiving. We don't have to decide tonight, but I wanted to throw that out for people to think about, unless we do decide.
I'm comfortable. Whichever else.
The
Yep.
November
That works
30th
for
meeting
me.
would be Monday the 27th because of Minnesota Watersheds meeting up north.
Monday the 27th would be the meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
If that doesn't alarm anybody, we'll get notice out on that. Thank you for putting together
As far as I
some
know.
information for me, Ms. Johnson. Manager Miller, Policy and Planning Committee meeting met tonight.
We had a workshop on a strategy action plan, which we worked on brand management and partnerships. And it was a good discussion, a lot of good ideas. And it's part of our continuation of a strategic plan to be considered at our annual board retreat.
Thank you. Manager Maxwell, were you at the Citizens Advisory Committee meeting last week?
Yes, I was last Wednesday, and that was a very good meeting. First of all, we had the award ceremony, not the award ceremony, but just the thanking of the award from Farber, the architect one, and then Mike did an update on the CIP. He also did an update on 325 Blake. Samantha did a little thing on the website, basically. I think we'd get back to 325 a little bit more. They were talking about some of the signage, and it kind of got to the point where I think a lot of people want more, not so many signs, but more educational signs. Something that, was a little more educational for people, that they could either go to a web page and look to see what this meant or what that meant and how it went about there.
Like QR
Yeah.
codes,
Yeah, so it was a good meeting. I think we had a good turnout. There was 9 out of 13, 13, I think, so. a good meeting.
Thank you. Thanks for attending. Our upcoming meetings are the standard second and fourth Thursdays in June for committee and board. We'll move now to item 11, which is Resolution 23-029. Ms. Schauffer presenting concerning the boardwalk.
President White, managers, tonight staff is seeking authorization to amend a contract. Oops, I should probably start my presentation. Apologize. With SRF Consulting Group for design and engineering services for the Minnehaha Boardwalk reconstruction. At the last meeting on May 11th, staff reported on construction deficiencies that were identified by the City of St. Louis Park and outlined that staff, legal counsel, and SRF are working with the contractor to have those issues addressed. I'm here tonight to report on the findings of that further coordination with legal counsel, SRF, and the City of St. Louis Park, and outline a proposed process to ensure that the construction meets every detail in the design and specifications that the board approved. So tonight, what I'm going to walk through is where are we today? Talk through the construction process that got us here and the inspection process as well. Then from there, how do we resolve the issue? I'm going to walk through the protocol that we've outlined and reviewed with legal counsel and SRF, talk through the SRF amendment that's needed to implement that work, and then end with who's responsible for paying for the corrections and the costs and how that breaks down between the contractor, the designer, and the district. So here we are today. So I'm going to walk through the construction process around specifically the hangars. So what you see here in the picture are hangars. So there's 3 inside hangars that the joists then get put into, and then there's 2 outside hangars which are different because they have inside nailing to then hide the hanger as the joist gets installed on the edge. So what SRF's design allowed for was they specified hanger requirements and required that the hanger itself be galvanized and allow a minimum load capacity of 2,000 pounds. And they also required that the hanger sizing be allowed to have different skews. So as a boardwalk out there, we know curves a lot. There's different angles of the hangers that then could be used to support that. What happened then was JTS reviewed that requirements, and they submitted a proposed hanger that they felt met those requirements. SRF then reviews and approved JTS's submittal, saying that it met the conditions of the requirements, but that they had to use the max nailing schedule, and that will come into play later in my presentation and what that means. And this was approved by SRF via email to JTS. So once that was approved by SRF, then that manufacturer's requirements for the hanger and SRF's approval around that max nailing then becomes part of the specifications for the project. Then it's up to JTS, the contractor, to install the hangers per those specifications. So now I'm going to segue from the construction approval process into the inspections that were performed and how the issues were flagged during those inspections. So I just want to note at the top that first, the board did approve with SRF's contract some construction observation. And within that contract, SRF assumed 20 hours a week of construction oversight, and that they would provide daily records of the oversights along with pictures. And SRF did do that work. They were out there 20 hours a week, and they did record daily work with photos. District staff did supplement, I shouldn't say supplement, district staff were out there also inspecting periodically. And I'm going to walk through some specific schedule coordination inspections of SRF that we required during different points of the construction. So on March 22nd, staff requested an on-site inspection with SRF because the construction at that time had reached a critical milestone in that all the decking was on and no railing or curb had been installed. And we wanted to walk the site with SRF to ensure that everything was in compliance with the design and specifications before we started to then build up upon that work. It was during that meeting on March 22nd that district staff questioned the nailing of the hangers and if it had been done correctly. And here's a picture from that day. As you can see here, there's a bunch of open diamond nail holes on the hanger, and that caught staff's attention. When we questioned the SRF inspector, they noted that they were unsure as to how many nails were required, which then set off a chain of events, including the SRF inspector emailing the SRF design engineer and noting that they didn't know how many nails were to be installed. And then also, during that same inspection, district staff also asked the inspector on what were the acceptable tolerances for the spacing between the joists. So in this picture, that's the one coming in and meeting the header. So just wanted to document here that the SRF inspector wasn't aware of the nail requirements as they were doing the inspections, and that district staff then documented our concerns with the hanger nailing and that spacing to SRF after that inspection. So then a week later, on March 29th, the district convened a pre-substantial completion inspection with SRF and JTS. And this was due to, again, the construction had reached another decent milestone. They started to get railing installed, and also the main contacts from SRF and JTS were going on vacations. We want to make sure things were in good spots before they left. Ahead of this inspection, district staff emailed and documented its expectations of SRF, which included noting that we were relying on SRF as the design engineer and construction observer to understand the plans, specifications, and acceptable tolerances required for the spacing of those end joints and for the hanger installation. So as notes here that we just documented expectations of SRF, and then we documented the inspection. And mostly what this inspection found was a lot of raised decking concerns, particularly where radiuses were cut in. So you had decking that was a bit uneven that could cause tripping hazards. We also found a lot of decking that had some gaps or some knots in it. And then it was also flagged that nailing issue where the hangers weren't max nailed again.
Does that paint mark say that it's too high, like you tripped? Thank you.
And so, and then during this inspection, during the walkthrough, SRF did not note any concerns about the gaps between the header and the joist. So about a week later, and throughout the design and construction process, district staff had kept St. Louis Park staff abreast on the project, seeking input when it made sense, and also kept them actively up to date with about bi-weekly email updates on construction progress. So on April 6th, staff sent an email to St. Louis Park noting that the work was nearing completion and that we would be planning a substantial completion inspection soon, and wanted to know who from the city would need to attend that. This then prompted St. Louis Park to go out and perform the inspection on April 12th. And it was this inspection that St. Louis Park brought to the district and SRF's attention that first JTS hadn't had a building permit issued for the work. They had applied for it and had paid some money, but they still owed some money to have the permit be issued. And if they had actually received the permit ahead of starting the work, they would have been required to perform inspection framing, to schedule framing inspections, which would have likely prevented some of the issues we're reviewing tonight. In addition to the city identifying that the permit had been issued, they also noticed that nails were missing again on those hangers, and they also noticed large gaps and some other ADA compliance issues. This then prompted the district to convene a joint inspection between the contractor, JTS, the design engineer, SRF, and St. Louis Park, and we did that on April 18th. And this inspection revealed a number of issues with the hangers. So here This is actually St. Louis Park inspector under the boardwalk. So you can see there's large gaps. So there's large gaps here between the joist and right next to the header. And it's above, what's pictured here is above the acceptable tolerance for the hanger. And again, here's some of these ADA compliance issues. There's some stuff out there that the former design necessarily wasn't in compliance with some ADA compliance stuff, so we're working to bring that in. So this is one of the railings here. Technically, you have to have kind of a catchment where if someone were to fall off those steps, they wouldn't fall. So after this joint inspection with the city, the conclusion of the inspection was direction from SRF was to get the hanger manufacturer on site, which is MyTech, to understand from their perspective what of this is acceptable, what's unacceptable, and are there ways to bring resolution to this. So then, I apologize, this should say May 4th, it says May 8th on the screen, but on May 4th, the district convened a joint meeting between JTS, SRF, St. Louis Park, and MyTech, the manufacturer. In this inspection, SRF had requested that JTS uncover decking at 8 random locations, just to get a sense of what was going on out there. And this inspection revealed, I'll show pictures here next, again, nailing wasn't max nailed, so all these holes in this picture should be nailed. You see there's 5 on each side. It revealed that, again, the gaps between the joist and the header were much larger than was acceptable. It revealed, in this case, the craftsmanship in this case, they cut the joist so short that they filled it with a shim, which the MyTech
Which doesn't
engineers-
help.
Yeah, the MyTech engineer said there's no way to correct that with a hanger, so that's completely just unacceptable. And in this case, they used inside hangers, hammered them, and applied them as outside hangers. So they completely modified the hangers themselves.
Pounding them flat. Wow.
So during this inspection and at the conclusion of the inspection, both SRF and JTS agreed that the project has not been built to specification, which is different than we found ourselves obviously last time with the boardwalk construction issues, because we have agreement with everyone before the project is finished that there are issues. So now I'm going to segue from the inspections and the issue themselves into how we're the protocol to get to correction. But I can pause here if there's any questions on what got us to here.
Just a general question. The top left, is that a nail going through the joist itself at the bottom? And then there's a hole at the top that's empty. Is that another example of?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so Manager Olsen, there is a nail going here.
Yep.
And you are correct, there's another nail over there, and that is to prevent, like in a big wind event, uplift. So those are supposed to be nailed.
Okay.
They were supposed to nail the joist, and the decking is screwed on though?
Correct.
So screwed, that'll come off easier than the nails.
Yeah, Manager Maxwell managers, where we did ask them to uncover, to what Manager Maxwell is saying is it's unscrewing, which is easy to disassemble, and SRF doesn't find that causes any
Damage to the wood.
damage to the wood.
Did they use the right size nail?
Manager Maxwell, yes, they use the right size. Well, there's different sizing of nails that's allowed, and that's something that SRF is also reviewing on just how that factors into
The longevity of the
the loading
stability
and
stability of the
Yep.
project.
all right.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we somewhat know what we're dealing with, but we just want to note that as we move into correction of the work that's out there, just want to be explicitly clear that it is the contractor's responsibility to correct the current construction deficiencies. However, the district wants to ensure that every construction issue is documented and accounted for. So before you is this evening in the packet is a protocol that outlines how the boardwalk will be inspected, how those inspections will document deficiencies, and how SRF will then determine where required work is needed. And I just want to note that staff has worked with council to help review and prepare this protocol for implementation. So next I'm just going to quickly walk through kind of the flow of this. So SRF, there's two different inspections that staff has provided along the way. Again, documenting when we convene the City of St. Louis Park out there, we document those inspections. So SRF has a good punch list to work from, and we'll use that to inventory and document known deficiencies and how they do not meet the design or the specifications. From there, SRF is working right now to develop an inspection plan and inspection protocol. So how do we go out and actually find every deficiency that's out there and document that? From there, we will then phase the inspections. So phase one is, as you saw that picture of that St. Louis Park staff member, we can visibly see about 2/3 of the boardwalk without disassembling anything. We can crawl underneath it. So we anticipate that'll take about a week to do that, and district staff and City of St. Louis staff, St. Louis Park staff will be joining SRF as they perform that work. So at the conclusion of the phase one work, we'll see just how widespread the issues are and use that data to then inform, do we need to not uncover anymore and it wasn't as widespread as we thought, or is it justifiable that we then start to request that JTS actually uncover work at the headers to really look at those hangers. And if we do direct that work, we'll be reviewing that further with JTS and SRF just to make sure that we're doing that in a way that's least disruptive, but is in the best interest of getting everything documented. From there, once the inspection's done, SRF will again add to the inventory of defective work, share that with JTS, and then identify areas of correction that are required. JTS will then be allowed to propose solutions to those deficiencies. SRF will review those solutions and will recommend to the district if it should be accepted or not. If it's allowed to be accepted, then SRF will respond and identify specific deadlines for those corrections. JTS will implement, and then we will do a final correction inspection. So, for all of this work in this protocol that's laid out, staff has asked SRF to provide a cost estimate for this, and they've estimated at $26,790 to perform this work.
Who are they asking to pay for that?
I'll get to that.
Okay.
So, to allow SRF to provide the granularity needed to diagnose all the issues, a budget amendment is needed according to the district's current contract with SRF to do this more detailed inspection. I will note that JTS is responsible for most of these costs, and the district can withhold payment to JTS to pay SRF once that payment comes due. But I do want to note that if the board approves this budget amendment, it doesn't waive the district's right to assess the adequacy of SRF's construction oversight, and this is something that staff has documented numerous times in writing to SRF. However, council's recommendation at this time is to move forward as efficiently as possible to correct the construction defects, which means for the time being we need to maintain a good working relationship with SRF. And once the construction has been corrected and before final payment to SRF, staff and SRF have agreed to reconcile that billing and discuss the adequacy of that construction oversight. So next, to Manager Loftus' question, I am going to cover who is responsible. So in talking with legal counsel, the district is on solid contractual ground to require JTS to correct. And then as, if defects are found as we're doing those inspections, they're also responsible to pay for SRF's time to do that. However, if the work that we request, if we request them to uncover work, because that's time, their time and to do that, then JTS isn't responsible for that, and that's where it could be what the watershed or SRF responsible. However, as I walk through, we're trying to take a thoughtful and phased inspection approach to really reduce that risk of uncovering anything that isn't defective. And then again, if JTS isn't responsible, that's where that discussion with SRF will come into play as part of our contract reconciliation at the end of the project. And I just want to summarize, JTS still has about $300,000 owed to them for work, so they obviously have an incentive to keep being cooperative, which they have been to date. And lastly, I just want to note that because of how the project maintenance program budgeted for construction of the boardwalk, and most of that money coming out of the 2023 budget rather than the 2022 budget, there will be a broader program budget amendment coming in upcoming board meetings just to transfer some funds to account for that. So that's, and I'm going to end with next steps, but I just want to stop and pause and see if there's questions here around the cost and payment side of things. So I know that's an important part of it.
Do we have documentation that this company, JTS, is licensed, bond, and insured?
Manager Westphal, can you?
Do we have documentation that JTS is licensed, bond, and insured?
Yeah, Manager Maxwell, that's part of, before we even issue a notice to proceed.
Okay,
part
just
of our
want to make sure that,
requirements.
yeah, because it didn't seem, but then how long do they, once they go back and correct it, did they put any kind of warranty on it, or once they built it, do they have any kind of warranty?
Manager Maxwell, that's a good question. And
Mr. Smith?
Madam President Manager, so that would be a contractual commitment and also statutory one. I can't tell you the length of time, but we can follow up.
Well, yeah, because then we follow up with that. If we didn't expect the whole thing, every board or every hangar would come back later on and say, well, this hangar broke and somebody got hurt, who's going to be responsible for that down the line? And I think SRF should be responsible for all the dollars that if they said they're going to be out there 20 hours a week and taking pictures, I think they would have took a picture and said, well, something's not right on day one that they were out there, let alone day 35.
There'll be a lot more discussion, but could I get a motion to adopt the resolution?
yeah, sorry, I can finish up with next steps and get to.
I'm sorry I cut you off. I apologize.
So I just want to talk through, you know, if the board were to approve the amendment tonight, what we would do next week is work to finalize that inspection plan and protocol, and that's something that we will then also be reviewing with JTS and kind of formalize this process and their requirement to correct and obligation to cover SRF's costs. And then the week of June 5th, we look to actually go out and perform the inspections with SRF, and St. Louis Park also wants to participate in those. So lastly, the board's request tonight is to authorize the administrator on advice of council to execute a contract amendment with SRF Consulting Group to increase the total contract not to exceed by the amount of $26,790.
Thank you, Ms. Schaffer. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
So moved.
Manager Olson, is there a second? I'll second it so we can have it on the table for discussion. Questions? Manager Miller?
There's two people that did their job out of the four. You guys for being honest, coming forward, telling what the mess is. It could have been covered up. So I congratulate you on that part. I won't make any comment about holding SRF accountable for their inspection. In St. Louis Park, who in the hell ever relies on the building inspector to tell you your project is sound. I mean, that just doesn't happen. It's just kind of a pro forma. And I'm just grateful that the inspector took his job seriously, because, you know, those hangers could easily come down, you know. And I'm out there often, so I got personal interest. I'm not gonna vote for this. I don't want anything to do with SRF. You know, if they say they're taking pictures and they're out there 4 hours a day and miss something as critical as this, I mean, what else do you inspect? Unless the construction. I mean, the poles were already there. All they had to do is look and see the connections. And the board's still short like that, not even going all the way into the boulder. It's pretty sloppy work.
Manager Olson?
In addressing that board being too short, the solution then is to take that joist out and put a longer one in?
Manager Olson, yes, that's the only likely solution. There could be one where you kind of, there's been discussion where you could have installed a sister joist right next to it, so you wouldn't have to take it apart, but you would install another piece of lumber in addition to what's there.
I see, okay. So, because the idea that you're unscrewing every single walk surface board, because you've got so many nails, but screws going into that joist. That's a lot of disassembly just to get a longer board in there. Okay.
Yeah, and that's Manager Olson, managers, and that, you know, we're not gonna, we don't direct means and methods or how we're gonna do the work. That's why we're relying on the contractor to propose corrections, rely on the design engineer to make sure that it adheres and meets the specifications.
Yeah.
And city code, or sorry, I should state Minnesota code. And if it does, then it's up to district to then review that and take it from there.
Manager Loftus?
I'm pretty surprised that SRF has got the gall to come to us and ask for a contract change. Why would we pay for that upfront and then figure it out later? Why, I don't understand that. And then the risk of uncovering, they don't have a building permit. Nothing they've put out there is guaranteed to stay out there, as far as I'm concerned. That is not our risk that they have to uncover or not uncover. How that is put on us, I don't quite understand. I don't know who's supposed to check they have a building permit, if we were supposed to have that beforehand, but they built this with no building permit, which means anything and everything they've done so far could be required to be ripped out. And that isn't our risk. So I'm not sure why we are held for any of that $26,000. And why they would feel comfortable asking us to amend our contract ahead of time, and then maybe we'll figure it out later. It's a goofy process. And I know it's not your fault, Tiffany, or anything, but it doesn't make any sense to me.
Can I respond?
Yeah, you may.
So a few things there. One is we want to get this done and corrected as efficiently as we can. And in talking with council, recommendation was stick with SRF. Staff.
You're talking about our legal counsel?
Yes, legal counsel. Stick
Okay.
with SRF. Be out there alongside every step of the way that we're doing this. The inspections to make sure
And
that
just
that's
pay for
documented.
duplicate inspections.
Well, they're the design engineer, so we've said that we don't want that same inspector out there. That's pretty displeased with that. And, you know, obviously raise the flag that we want to talk about payment and that towards the end of the contract. I think SRF wasn't the one that came to us with the amendment. We requested this from them. After walking through with legal counsel on the protocol, we then asked them to put together hours to do the work. Again, in the spirit of trying to bring resolution to this as soon as possible.
Louis, do you have a rationale behind that approach?
Madam President, Manager Loftus, I haven't been directly involved in the discussions, but what I do understand is that time is an important consideration for getting the work inspected and corrected. And
Because why?
Pardon?
Why do you feel that way?
I take it as a given from conditions in the field and the staff. It's not a legal judgment about urgency of time. We could take as much time as the board would
To
like.
get it right.
And we could fire SRF, and we could go find another firm to do the work.
Or they could pay to correct their mistakes. There's no reason we need to offer to pay them. No legal reason?
I think it's a matter of a practical judgment about the best way to move forward the most expeditiously. It is not a requirement that we agree to pay them more to get this done.
Okay.
Manager Olson?
I'm fine, thanks.
Did you have a question, Manager Sando? Go ahead.
This is a small thing at this time, but do we know what's the requirement, how many nails in each hanger? How many nails are required in each hanger? They said there might be some missing. And then the other one is the joist not hitting the header, just right on, kissing it. And that both those look to me as close enough, you know. It requires 5 nails, and we put in 3, and we cut it a little short, and I think everything should be snug in the amount of nails, and it should kiss the header.
Yeah, Manager Sando, there's specific, I think it's 28 nails, so again, the specifications require exactly that. How many nails should be there? There's tolerances for the gap. There's a certain size that's allowed, so we need to understand where are we in excess of that acceptable gap tolerance, that's to meet specifications.
Thank you. Manager Hishmati, do you have anything you'd like to ask?
I have the same question as Manager Loftus, so
Okay,
I think she asked it for me, so.
thank you. Manager Matsky?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mr. Hayman?
Manager Hajmati, Madam President, and board managers, to clarify, I think a little bit, or direct maybe a response more to Manager Loftus's question, is there's really 2 things going on here, and I don't want one to outweigh the other. The inspection and whether or not the inspections were conducted appropriately and to what expense there is to conduct additional inspections is one matter. The issues that are out on site right now that we've discovered are not SRF's fault. These are an issue of craftsmanship in the field and a contractor installing the hangers, cutting lumber incorrectly, etc. So the fault of the actual issues out there lies solely with JTS. There are concerns with how inspections
They
were
catch it.
correct, and that is absolutely a secondary question, and one in which, when we've been dealing with legal counsel or discussing with legal counsel, we want to have a clear accounting of what is necessary to inspect moving forward in order to have JTS correct and also pay for that work. So there are 2 separate issues. Whether or not the board would like to enter into a contract amendment is the question before you this evening, but the issues on site are the responsibility of the contractor, and they will have to correct them one way or another. We would like to have the appropriately defined protocols for identifying all of the issues on site, now knowing how extensive they may be.
Would they fail their inspection right now? Would St. Louis Park be willing to
That's
just
what's-
fail them?
Yeah, Manager Loftus.
Great.
I mean, they're not.
They can start over then,
Yeah, they wouldn't.
at their expense.
Mr. Smith?
Just want to follow up on making sure one thing. I don't think we've concluded yet that the work condition in the field is not SRF's fault. That is yet to be determined, and there is some reason to believe that the lack of proper inspection of the field or even understanding the manufacturer's requirements, the specs requirements, and the failure to monitor that and observe that work effectively and properly in accordance with professional standards seems to be a very big concern. So I wouldn't want to say that it is only a matter of JTS responsibility. But I also agree that correcting the work in the field is ultimately JTS's responsibility.
I understand that not everything is, you can't just point at one person, but I certainly am not in favor of throwing money at the problem. That isn't going to work. It's not going to get it fixed. It's not going to solve it. It's not going to get the work done right, in my opinion.
Mr. Whisker and then Manager Miller.
I think Manager Loftus and the board's zeroed in on the crux of the issue with the support from staff and legal counsel. I think generally the concept here was to pay SRF to move forward quickly on the assumption that there are a large volume of observable problems that JTS is going to be paying for. So we're the broker of the contract, but we're also holding JTS's money, and this is going to cover the contract costs with SRF. Versus the option that's, I think, the board's actively discussing, which would be to adopt, a more, not an adversarial, but holding SRF accountable and compelling them towards doing this at their cost or finding a different engineer to work through the inspection and identifying what it is that JTS needs to fix to conform to plans and specifications. Just to be clear, if the board's comfortable taking more time, we can certainly meet with SRF and have that conversation and deliver that message and compel them that direction. It will take longer, but I think that that's the board's prerogative. And I think everything that you've kind of triangulated on is fair point.
Do we believe they wouldn't deal with this quickly and that we think paying them would make them act quicker? I mean, why is that the assumption? Based on just your experience with them over the past few months?
I mean, I've asked the same question, so I'd ask Tiffany just on sort of the relational dynamic and the conversations that we've had with SRF. I think it's going to take, I think that it would take longer to sit down with them and leadership and have them go out and take the time to we'll have to negotiate around how they're going to do that. And I think that I'll stop there.
I mean, the opposite is you don't keep paying SRF.
Yep.
Or JTS until the work's done right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that is another motivator if you're looking for motivation.
Yeah, that's right. And I think...
And I don't think it's adversarial necessarily. I don't know. Go ahead.
I think it'll take a little bit more time to work through, and that is perfectly, if the board's comfortable.
It isn't our choice, right?
That's right.
Two different points. This is not building a Golden Gate Bridge and checking hangers and nails.
Yeah.
I mean, I could have taken the contract for a lot less than that. Going out crawling under there and seeing if there's enough nails and it's close enough. I could just see the next lawsuit where SRS says, they hired us again, and we're confident, and these guys, I don't know why they're holding us responsible, because they hired us twice to do this work. I'm not going to vote for this. I commend the staff for coming up with a solution, but it doesn't make any sense to me.
Manager Olson.
What I'm hearing is the board saying you haven't demonstrated how fair this is. The sound is, it's not fair. Why do you think it's fair? If you're bringing this to us, you've put thought into it. Is there a fairness that we're not seeing?
Manager Olson, good question. I think in looking at the tasks that are in front of us and the amount of it, and looking through the protocol, staff's assumption was a lot of that would be covered by JTS. And
we don't know how much or what portion, right?
Well, I mean, just going out and doing inspections, or I guess participating in all the inspections to date. Particularly the last one we did which we just uncovered random spots, and all spots had an issue. I think people, you almost sense the contractor himself became pretty deflated and frustrated and was losing confidence in the work that his crew had performed. So, and then myself, I just, started to walk what's pictured right here, this section. And there's issues pretty consistently at each header, whether it's not nails installed, the gap. So it's pretty likely there's going to be a deficiency. I can't say that for certain, but just what I've observed.
Can you describe this protocol? You've mentioned it a couple times. Is this like a response to us being nervous about what needs to get done exactly how, and we don't know that they understand the specs and that it's going to be done? Or I'm not sure what the protocol should be other than build it to specs.
Yeah, so Manager Loftus, it was I can go back to slides, but really within our contract documents in the general conditions, it talks through when you encounter something like this, how to work through it, and who's responsible. And that's what we've been working with legal counsel on, is first identify the deficiencies, how do they apply to the specs. From there then, come up with a protocol to inspect to make sure you've captured them all. Then review corrections that are needed, review corrections, implement corrections. And through that process, that's where they're saying the responsibility falls to the contractor to implement and to pay for any time.
And what does that have to do with this $26,000 amendment to their contract, the protocols?
What's before you in the packet is the protocol. It's SRF's time to actually implement the protocol that we've walked through.
So we're paying them to implement the protocol that they agreed to in the contract they signed with us.
Let me correct.
Yeah.
So this is the protocol we walked through with legal counsel.
Yeah.
We said, SRF, this is what we need you to do to hold JTS accountable.
Yeah.
We need a price. We will then hopefully not be paying SRF. If it all does fall to JTS, we will then be withholding payment from JTS's pay request to pay SRF.
And I agree with everything you said for all these steps up until the point where you said we asked them for a price. I don't need a price from them, but I need them to do that work. That's their responsibility, is it not? Why are we paying them for that?
It might be JTS's responsibility.
Fine.
We need to know that number.
Yeah, we need to know the number. We're saying,
Do we?
Manager Maxwell?
yeah.
Just a couple of quick ones. I forgot what I was going to say. Is it like the ones that the boards that had not said, they're going to replace those too, right? Because those will rot out right away.
Yeah, Manager, those have already been replaced.
Oh, okay, and then the second part is Jessica came up with a good point, St. Louis Park, because they're the ones that have to sign off on the final. I think we have to go back and work with St. Louis Park more and say, all right, to their building inspectors, everything else, what are you people going to be happy with, and what don't you sign off on? Because they're the final. We don't sign off on anything. We just pay the money. We need somebody that says, here's the work, it's to our satisfaction. It's not to St. Louis Park's satisfaction, then tell them to take it off and do it all over again. Because St. Louis Park will end up somewhere in the lawsuit if something happens too. So basically, I'd throw it back to St. Louis Park. I'd communicate with them really well and say, how are we gonna solve this together? Not just the Watershed District, but and what are you gonna be happy with at the final to sign off on this permit that wasn't issued, that was issued that they didn't agree to?
Yeah, Manager Maxwell, that's a really good point, and I should have said this in the presentation. St. Louis Park has been fantastic to work with, as we know, but this is a new set of staff we've been working with. And they have said it has to meet the design specifications that SRF laid out, because that's also the code. So as long as it meets the design specs, they're good. They will not settle for anything less. And at the end of the day, SRF, as the design engineer, does need to sign off that the contract, or that the design meets the specifications.
Then I would tell the SFLRS to go back and talk to St. Louis Park and say, what are you going to sign off on? Because it's your responsibility, it's not ours. It's JTS and
I mean, we are paying them to manage the project for us, right?
I have a couple of questions. I understood you to say that JTS would not be responsible for costs if they had to uncovering, I wrote down.
If there was not.
If there's
no
not a
defect.
deficient, yeah, so if we ask them to uncover a header and there's no defects,
Ah, okay.
then technically that cost would fall to the district.
And how much was their bid under anybody else's? Do you recall those numbers?
JTS's?
JTS, yeah.
It was like $40,000, it was real close.
Mhm. And then also, I think I read in here that one of the jobs SRF would be undertaking is to figure out what their responsibility is also. So you're asking them to report on themselves? Did I remember that correctly? Maybe not.
President White, again, I'm not sure what,
Well, I'll just let that go. If the board does not want to make a decision tonight, is the best option, Mr. Smith, to have a motion to table? Yes.
Madam President, if the board is not inclined to approve the resolution,
Mhm.
then certainly you may table it for consideration in another meeting, or you may direct some other communication that the staff convey to SRF that something like the sentiment of the board is that it is not acceptable to be paying SRF for more scope, that this should fall within their existing duties, and they should be expected to proceed expeditiously.
Thank you. Mr. Whisker?
Building off what Mr. Smith said, I would offer up, just based on what I'm taking as the general temperature of the board, that the protocol that exists in our contract for resolving these issues that Tiffany's laid out, the only reason for needing that protocol is due to JTS not pulling permits and building to plan and spec, and SRF not identifying those issues. And so we could certainly, between now and the next board meeting, I think, have a conversation to relay the board's feedback and compel SRF to run the protocol up to phase 2 to do all the, inspect all the accessible work that does not require uncovering, and secure the costs from JTS as they're running into issues, and then work through the rest of it and come back with an alternative solution at the next board meeting, so that we can actually get them in the field running through the protocol under the existing contract that we have with SRF.
Do we believe St. Louis Park isn't gonna make them uncover? I think they probably will.
I hope they do.
Right, so I mean, why is it us asking them necessarily?
yeah, Manager Loftus, staff discussed with St. Louis Park, just a similar discussion that we're having with you tonight, and just asked again, like, what do they want, what do they need? They said, once SRF develops the inspection protocol and plan, they'd like to review that, but they thought the approach made sense is first inspect everything that doesn't require disassembly. Like I said, they can help be a part of that, and once we get to the conclusion of that, then we can make a determination of,
You guys
Do
are
we need
very,
to-
very nice.
I don't know that St. Louis Parks necessarily, and this is a conversation that we can have, adopting a position where they'd require, they'd fail it and they're requiring the contractor to take this back down to the helicals.
But they won't approve it either.
Right, so we're kind of
So-
stuck in this position of needing to identify where all the failure points are and making JTS fix those things. And the question is, how are we going to figure out exactly where all the failure points are?
I think the
Fail the whole
question is,
project.
how are they gonna prove to us
Yeah.
that there aren't failure points all the way along? Not, how are we gonna prove to ourselves?
That's
that
right.
it's not?
And I think
Manager
that the
Miller,
yeah.
then Manager Maxwell, then Manager Sendo.
Yeah, I'll be willing to substitute a motion here to sue SRF. No,
Give them a shot, but
No,
it's,
I'm serious. We're not a bunch of rummies that, you do work if you want to do work, and they'll fall for it. I mean, they said they were going to be inspecting it on our behalf to make sure their nails were all in and the headers met. That's not a big assignment. You got to be able to check it every day and say, oh, there's missing some nails here and it's too short. I mean, it's not building a Golden Gate Bridge. These people didn't perform. Why the hell are we hiring them to do something else?
Thank you, Manager Maxwell.
On the boards, I would get in writing what JTS is gonna charge us to uncover board that they say is correct,
Zero.
before we don't get billed for thousands of dollars for something that's, well, this was good, but we'll charge you $800 to do this. I'd get it in writing, how much they're gonna charge us for, once they would take out a board and put it, and look at it and say, oh, that was correct, and put it back. What do they wanna charge us?
Why would you ask someone what they want to charge you? You would tell them, this is
Yeah.
our expectation.
Yeah.
Get it right and prove it to us that it's right.
Manager Sando, did you have a question?
I was just gonna mention that
Mr.
the contractors have to be, realize why we're so gun shy due to past history. So it has to be done right. And what happened before is this came up years later. So what's gonna happen years from now? We're gonna be back in the same spot if something starts to sag. Because we're going to go through all this all over again.
Could you refresh my, what was the total bid on this whole project again? 1 point?
Manager Maxwell, 1.8 million.
And when we got 700, 900 from the lawsuit?
400.
400?
Settlement.
Net. What was the net?
It was a $600,000
600,000,
settlement.
okay.
Less
So we're
legal.
$1,400,000. And we're not happy.
Manager Olson.
Out of that bid, we had a 10%. Do we have a 10% contingency on that? And am I assuming that we've burned through 10% contingency?
On the bid, construction bid? No, they have not asked for a single change order. We've paid out about 1.5 million of the 1.8.
Okay, so under the normal conditions, I've got two questions. Under normal conditions, SRF would do a certain amount of work. Now we're asking them to do a different pile of work worth, say, 26,000. We haven't gone through our contingency money, and we are we still without a building permit?
We have a building permit. The building permit was issued April 27th,
And they started,
approximately March 7th.
so a month and a half or more later.
Are they gonna try and bill us for the double fee they have to pay for not getting the building permit? I'm joking. I mean, it's not our fault they didn't get a building permit.
Okay, so they do have a bill, okay. And the permit is why we had an inspector come out and take a look at it. Thank you.
Tell
is
me
it-
about your 1.5 you paid out of 1.8. What were the triggers or the releases on that? Why would you pay that percentage at this point?
You're relying again on SRF to review within the contract, it has measurement and payment. So when they've installed so much decking or so much railing, remove so much boardwalk, then they're due payment for that.
Do you think we have 83% of the work done? Because they have 83% of their payment.
Yeah, I think the issue, right, is that last pay request that got paid,
Was signed off by SRF.
yeah, it would have been beginning of April, ahead of kind of all of this coming to light.
But Manager Loftus, I would say that over 83% of the work is complete. Certainly. The entire boardwalk is constructed. There are deficiencies with the hangars, and those can be corrected, but the remainder of this boardwalk is an absolutely beautiful structure. So, to be clear, there are concerns around the hangars.
If
All
they have
of
to
it-
replace all that
Well,
lumber,
that
then
is-
how much work is that?
that would be a question for the contractor.
Yeah, and that would be a lot of work. It is not 83% complete to our satisfaction.
I don't have a percentage of stringers that would need to be replaced right now.
Yeah.
And the city's,
It's not 100%.
The city's gonna do the final inspection.
So, does anyone
frustrating for
disagree that we
everybody.
need to figure out what is wrong?
We know what's wrong.
How much is wrong? What does it take to fix
Assume
it?
it's all wrong.
I think we can figure it out.
I think
Think most of it looks wrong.
Continue it and then have the cities, have the staff work, see if they work with SRF and JTS and come with a final solution that's gonna make us happy.
Don't we have to check every point? We're not just gonna let them pass on a sample. Are we?
I'm not.
I mean,
Manager Loftus case, but I was not now.
so why is it a question of what needs to be done? I mean,
Mr. Whisker, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I would just suggest that unless there's consensus between board and staff on the exact preferred next steps moving forward, that you don't act on the resolution and you direct staff to go turn the screws to the contractor and SRF and report back in 2 weeks as to how we're bringing this to resolution in a way that we're not approving this budget amendment.
Can I ask a question of council? Is there a way, what the manager is saying, to require JTS to somehow prove that everything is meeting the design standards? You know, obviously they know the deficiencies that have been flagged. So say, go out there and, you know, apply the repairs to what's already known, and then you come back and inspect.
Madam President, in response to Ms. Schaffler's question, the way that contract operates is that through SRF, SRF identifies the nonconformity with the specs, and contractors are required to address those nonconformities. So this gets to then how thorough is the inspection, first of all, the monitoring of the construction in the first place, and now through the protocol, the follow-up inspections. And so I think the spirit of Manager Loftus's point is the burden should now, given this state of affairs, the burden now needs to be on JTS to prove that it's going to be completely problem-free. And we will work through the protocol process to get to that level of satisfaction one way or another, but it'll be through this process.
well, and I think it's a reasonable extrapolation to say, here's the issue. It likely applies elsewhere and everywhere, versus saying it applies here and we assume it doesn't apply anywhere else until you tell us we have to rip it up and I mean, those aren't, I don't think any court or judge is gonna say, oh, that's unreasonable.
And I understand the first phase, not to simply be a matter of faith about what's uncovered. It's to be going through a process, first with the uncovered areas, to identify what we have, and then make an informed judgment about the merits of uncovering other areas.
Yeah, manager office managers, one thing that the city inspector did note was they likened it to a bridge inspection where they're doing an epoxy review of anchors. And so what they noted was the first phase will look at every single hangar and document every hangar on all of the boardwalk that can be accessed from below, which is almost 80% of the boardwalk.
Yep.
Then they would take that ratio, exactly what you said, and apply it, and the city would say, okay, that's X amount. They're asking the engineer to apply what would be a reasonable assumption based on what you found after reviewing thousands of hangars. Because where they uncovered each location, it wasn't that every hangar was wrong or everyone had a gap. There's a percentage, and so they would want to apply that the same to know that if they want to go and cover the northern boardwalk, which is the low boardwalk that you cannot get under.
And that falls to the client as a duty.
That's not what I'm suggesting.
Oh, okay.
I'm noting what the city inspector has noted, how they would review, the need to uncover further would be based on their review of those logs.
I'd tell the city inspector to get his wetsuit on because he'd been in a lot of water for a long time.
Yes. Manager Mahdi.
Yeah, I have a question.
Thank you.
That speaks and, I'm finding it difficult to trust both SRF and JTF.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if, I'm going on all these percentages, I'm concerned that with the sloppy work that JTS has done, the sloppy inspection that SRF has done, and, making sure that everything is right, they've done a very good job. Rather than relying on them, can we hire another independent contractor who can go in and inspect everything and make sure that it's, let us know if there's still work that needs to be done.
At SRF's cost. And
And
another
not the
bill.
SRF, not trust them, but find someone who independent who can look at it and tell us.
Hire someone else.
Whether it's been done right or not. If it's not been done right, then we can turn to JGS and say, okay, this has not been done right, you fix it. But if it has been done right, then of course not, then we don't ask them to fix it. So essentially, I'm saying we don't trust both of them. Can we find someone independent to inspect and tell us, inspect every place and tell us what's happening?
Mr. Whisker?
I'm not going to respond directly to Manager Hejmati's question, so I just want to keep that on the table for the board and others to respond to. I mean, I think based on where we are, everybody's looking for the solutions forward and recognize that SRF and JTS has some culpability and we don't want to be left holding the bag. I would suggest that, the protocol in the contract calls for inventorying first, inspecting all the accessible work, and where there's deficiencies, then directing JTS to make those fixes, and then using whatever you find there to guide if you're disassembling other parts of the boardwalk to find more problems. So there's a gate. I would recommend that we go meet with JTS and SRF first and say that you missed all of this on inspections, and so you have to go do the inspections for all of the accessible portions at your cost and at your risk. And wherever there's deficiency, you can recover those costs from JTS. And then we can take that information and apply that however we want through that next gate or uncovering the rest of the boardwalk. But really what you're saying is you don't want to be approving this budget amendment and paying SRF to do work that they should have caught to begin with to fix work that JTS did incorrectly. So what I'm hearing is go tell our inspector to do the work at their cost and compel the contractor to fix it. And while we might feel like we have a lot of time, and we have all the time in the world because we're the project owner, I do think that that is a reasonable next step, an amount of work that's going to occupy the next 2 weeks, and then we could report back to the board. So unless there's a real specific recommendation or consensus recommendation that the board can get to on how you'd like to move forward in the next 2 weeks, we know we're going to be back in front of the board. That's the recommendation that I'd make, that we would take, that doesn't put us spending money over between now and the next board cycle.
I pretty much agree with that, but I would also include St. Louis Park in there to talk, to make sure that they know that we're talking to those people that St. Louis Park know exactly what's going on. We're on 3 weeks later saying, oh, we thought we told, to go back. Include them all.
Yes. I mean, we will definitely have a conversation with St. Louis Park based on the board discussion tonight to understand, their role in failing or passing the project. But we also have a contract structure that cascades from us as project owner through SRF as designer and construction oversight and inspector down to the contractor. So we're kind of really working through that contract structure. Obviously, we're grateful for St. Louis Park and their inspectors and their role in code enforcement and failing. So they're a factor. But I was speaking more to kind of the cost and the contract.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that St. Park is well informed of the process that we're going through. They're not saying, well, we didn't know we were going to do that, or,
I think it's an opportunity for SRF to prove they now know what the specs are
Yep.
by putting together this report and documenting all the deficiencies. Not that we 100% trust them to catch it all based on past performance, but this is an opportunity
But
for
with
them.
pictures and a written report, you'd hope that, we're not doing it on faith and trust. To your point, that they should do as a solid and go through every single hangar that they can see and take pictures and write it up. And
Yeah, I mean, yes.
In parliamentary procedure terms, can we just not act? We have a motion on the table.
Madam President, it'd be appropriate to table that motion or to have it withdrawn.
Okay.
I'd go for a table.
Are you feeling okay about tabling it, and then staff will go out and do that first phase and no money changes hands?
I'd be more comfortable with a board action, of some sort. You know, whether, so we're on record directing staff to do X, Y, and Z, and not approving this contract amendment.
Can we make a friendly amendment with James's language?
Yeah.
No such
Proposed?
thing as a friendly amendment,
Oh,
but yeah,
really?
you can make
Okay.
it.
We don't, whatever.
You can make
Unfriendly,
an amendment.
Oh.
unfriendly amendment.
Unfriendly?
Right.
I don't know.
To make one more point is that who's inspecting the inspector? I mean, we get, no, seriously.
Yeah.
We're just gonna go on his word, on the contractor's word. We looked at it, all the.
But if we pay him more, he'll know his job better, don't
Yeah.
worry.
Say that again.
I'm not being nice, I'm sorry.
Manager Sando, managers.
Yeah.
The city has offered an inspector to accompany the inspector throughout the entire.
That's very helpful of
Terrific.
them.
Correction,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I, if I may, I think to the point, we're not, if we move forward this direction, whether we're paying or not paying, if JTS is walking through this, whether they're side by side with St. Louis Park inspector looking over their shoulder or not, which it sounds like they will be, we'd be asking SRF to inspect all visible, accessible work and essentially take pictures and write down, does each hangar meet max nailing schedule, and document the distance on the gaps. And so it's you can either see it or you can't. I mean, it's
In theory, they have
verifiable
somebody's
information.
file,
We're not
right,
we're not
on
taking
their
this on trust.
Previous inspection?
I'd like to suggest that we have two separate motions. One is to table this, and the second is direction to staff to work with SRF, JTS, City of St. Louis Park, and do this visual inspection of what's available, and then report back to us on June 8th.
I'll support that. I move the table.
Second.
Second
Bill,
measure.
comment.
I'm just gonna let you know that I won't be voting for specific direction, only because, not because I don't think the staff is doing the right thing, but I think it's SRF and JTS's issue to fix. I'm not telling you, do this process and then we're good, because I don't believe that. So,
I'll let you make the motion, the second motion.
no, I was
But we
not
have a
voting for
motion.
your, I was just explaining why I wouldn't be voting for
For
the,
tabling?
no, for the staff direction motion.
We have, okay, got it. We have a motion to table, and
Yeah.
I'll take the vote by roll call. Are there any questions? That's not a debatable motion.
No.
Yeah. So voting on the motion to table, Manager Olson,
Aye.
Manager Loftus,
Aye.
Manager Maxwell,
Aye.
Manager Miller,
Aye.
Manager Hitchmati,
Aye.
Manager Sando,
All right.
Manager White also votes aye. That motion is tabled. Now, to what we want staff to do.
Bill?
I have a question for council. I need your appropriate or inappropriate decision. What if our board were to make a motion to allocate $26,790 of the $300,000 as money we may elect to pay SRF for additional work we're asking them to do, which would automatically put the burden onto JTS. So there would be the money recognition that they're claiming, with our intent to use the money we would have paid the other contractor. Is that got any legal?
Madam President, Manager Olson, I appreciate the spirit and the creativity. My gut just is not comfortable with that, as it's kind of a short circuit. I think you might get to where you want to go by simply a board direction to really put the screws to SRF and JTS and get this figured out quickly, and we're not in the mood to be approving more money for you right now.
Thank you, that's what I wanted to hear.
I don't want to reward some company for not doing their job.
Right.
Does someone want to make that a motion? for staff to go back to JTS SRF and tell them that.
Oh, there.
And we'll work with Sales Park also. I'll make that motion.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Sando seconds. Okay, voting on that motion. Manager Miller,
Abstain.
Manager Olson,
Aye.
Manager Loftus,
Nay.
Manager Maxwell,
Aye.
Manager Miller. I'm
Abstain.
sorry, you abstained. Manager Hitchmati,
Aye.
Manager Sando,
Aye.
and Manager White votes aye. The motion carries.
So what's the vote?
5 to 1 to 1.
5 to 1 with one
You want, yeah,
abstention.
you abstained, okay.
Because you're afraid you'll fall through it.
That's a toughie.
That's why you abstained.
Yeah.
That's a toughie.
Got that right.
I'm almost afraid to ask. Are there any board inquiries, issues, or ideas to be added to consideration this evening?
I have one.
Okay.
It
See,
just came up. Uh, I would like a report from the executive director on how we can improve the system. We thought we had it foolproof with outside supervisor and inspector certification and everything, and it obviously didn't work. Because we're going to be in other projects, and we want to make sure that we've learned from this one and how we can improve the system.
Okay, that goes on the list. Anything else? We'll then move to the administrator's report.
He was feeling so good before he got here tonight.
My spirits were light. Now they're medium heavy. President White managers were lightning with some water level updates.
Oh, good.
Twin Cities region's gotten just over 11 inches so far this season, so we're just shy of 2 inches above normal, but again, coming out of a drought and a deficit. The lake's just below OHW, Lake Minnehaha is 2 inches below ordinary high at 929.2. The dam is open. As of May 22nd, we've got 12 cubic feet per second coming out of Grays Bay Dam to promote base flow in the creek and then balance upstream water levels. It looks pretty hot and dry though for the next 14 days, so we're expecting general water level decreases, and we will keep you and communities posted on that. And then the other two updates I have are ones on the human resources front, and then the others with regards to the Supreme Court's decision regarding waters in the United States. There are a number of questions bouncing around during the committee, and I've asked Mr. Smith to speak briefly to that. But before, on the human resources front, just a couple of quick updates. We have completed a cycle of interviews for operations manager, unfortunately without being in a position to make an offer. So we're taking a brief pause and regrouping before we try again and relaunch that process and get the posting back up into the marketplace. Meanwhile, next week, Mike is going to be working to get a posting up for planner project manager position, and that'll be just another gauge of market conditions in terms of the volume of applicants we get and how they fare through the interview process. And while we're looking externally for to fill those operations positions and planner project manager positions in outreach, we've had some conversations with Samantha Mall about her interest in stepping into an interim or acting role as our outreach project manager. I think Samantha's already shown a great deal of ownership and leadership over the program so far, with her involvement in the Citizens Advisory Committee, from everything from the diagnostic to onboarding new members, advanced content planning. I think our new CAC with incumbents and new members alike are really happy. She spun up a digital newsletter for in-between meetings. I think the field trip and capstone to onboarding has been wildly successful. She's taken good ownership of the project manager role for the website, guiding our technical advisory committee process, and has been helpful in our strategic action plan dialogues with the board. So I think given the quality of her work to date and her interest, we've talked about having her
step into this opportunity and take ownership over next year's work plan and lead the backfilling for the communications position that Stacy Carlson was in. And give her an opportunity to work with the rest of organizational leadership to grow into the position and go through some final dates with clear expectations and timeline for decisions on how we might formalize that over time. So I'm pretty excited that she's interested, just given the work that she's done to date, and looking forward to how she might help take her outreach program to the next level. So I can pause there. Obviously, we are not at full capacity, and we're continuing to keep the information flowing on the personnel front, but if there's questions, I'll take those. And if there's not, Lewis can talk about waters of the United States.
No questions. Mr. Smith?
Well, we'll be done by midnight.
Oh, I lost the pool already.
Managers, I'll give you a brief summary of the SAC decision. The United States Supreme Court today issued an opinion that much more narrowly construed the Clean Water Act, and specifically the jurisdiction of the federal government in regulating access to the waters in the United States. And a couple of important broad themes for you to know. Number one, this affects the work that you and the district does largely not at all. This decision has much more impact in areas that don't have a Wetland Conservation Act or the other kinds of water resource related protections that our watershed district has as a regulatory program. That said, this has been a topic that has gone back and forth by presidential administrations with each election, by the majorities in Congress, and also by different Supreme Courts. So we're not going to be done with this issue. It'll keep swinging back and forth. The best way I can describe the impact of today's decision is that before today, the reading of the most recent Supreme Court decision, the most significant one, really had a variety of opinions about how you define the waters of the United States. But the working one that many followed, there was Justice Scalia's definition, which was a more narrow, you need to see a really direct connection to a navigable water of the United States for a wetland to be under the federal government's jurisdiction. And Justice Kennedy, Anthony Kennedy, was a more moderate justice, and he crafted this nexus test, which really was, is there a meaningful connection in terms of biology, chemistry, water resource dynamics, so that an impact to this wetland will in fact impact the navigable water of the United States? And I think we know from our watershed work that that is much more true to how Mother Nature functions. And unfortunately, what you understand and know to be true is not where our Supreme Court was today. So they went back to, can we see a surface connection to a navigable water for this wetland to fall under jurisdiction? And the case before them was just too remote, too attenuated to be something they thought the federal government should regulate. So it's kind of the pendulum swinging to a much more conservative view of the role the federal government should play in protecting wetlands, and for that matter, small streams. So much more can be said and much more will be written, but that's the essence.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lewis.
We are adjourned.